the land of tacos, quesadillas, and tequila, but also the land of drug lords, migration, and drug gangs. The latter is enough to put you off going to Mexico altogether, but the former is where the adventure lies. This is Mexico, and I went in the summer of 2022 and had the best time, and it is actually one of my favourite countries in the world, but there are still many things about it that I wish I knew before I went. So this video is the things I wish I knew before backpacking Mexico. Tip number one is not to solely base yourself in the Yucatan area of Mexico. It's great for adapting to the Mexican culture, but it's not real Mexico at all. You need to be able to go a bit further away to see the proper culture. What I mean by that is Cancun was built for American tourists. It was actually built from scratch in the geographically ideal location for Americans to come and for the summer holidays, basically. So it's kind of not the real culture. You've got the Chichen Itza, which is one of the seven wonders of the world, but other than that, there's not actually that many cultural things to do away from the beach and a few ruins. So I wish before I went, I did plan to go away from Yucatan to Oaxaca region, up to Mexico City, for example, to see the real Mexico. So it's something to bear in mind if you are planning a trip on just the Yucatan Peninsula. Tip number two is to take out insurance if you do hire a moped. It is one of the most popular ways for backpackers to get around because it really is so cheap. However, the shop owners, they will charge you for absolutely any scratch at all. So it's worth just paying a few extra dollars for insurance to save yourself. I ended up paying £200 for a scrape, which was not worth that whatsoever. But I had no leg to stand on because I didn't get insurance. Tip number three is not to plan too far ahead here. It's a very laid back lifestyle, so expect delays. Buses are rarely full, so you've got loads of time to plan in advance. Buses cost about £15 for a 4-hour journey, so you're talking fairly reasonably priced, so they don't go up too much closer to the time either. They're known as caminos, which are probably badly pronounced. Camiones, I think. I don't know. We'll come on to the Spanish speaking bit later. But be super flexible and make sure you don't plan too far ahead. Tip number four is to base yourself in one location at Easter time, or Semana Santa as they call it there. They take it super seriously, so it's a public holiday on the Thursday and the Friday in Mexico. So that means the transport will be late because of traffic, and hostel and hotel prices will also skyrocket. It'll get a lot more expensive because Mexicans will be traveling around as well. So book that in advance, plan far ahead, and kind of just stay put for that weekend wherever you want to be. But I wish I knew that before I went, because the hostel prices did get really, really expensive. Tip number five, halfway through, and that is you need about a month to see the south in Mexico. It is a big country and there are lots of places to go. People tend to just really focus themselves around the Yucatan, whereas there are so many other places to go. A month gives you enough time to really get to know the culture whilst also not going too quickly and accounting for delays. So don't just give yourself a week or 2 weeks like I did, frustratingly. Give yourself as long as possible there because you will really enjoy it. Now we're halfway through the video. Again, I always ask this, please do go down and subscribe. You got these tips for nothing, and there are 5 more to come. So if you found it useful, please do go and subscribe. Tip number 6, and that is Mexico is actually a very affordable country to backpack. One of the things which does increase your budget is staying on the Yucatan towns, whose prices are basically much, much higher. When you go further away, you can be spending about £35 per day, which is very reasonable, including about a £7 accommodation. So it is perfectly fine to travel if you are on a budget. You will also have to try the local foods, so local tacos, local quesadillas, which are unreal. They are the best food in Central America and a lot better than back home. And the great thing is they are really reasonably priced. So get away from the American restaurants, etc. if you're looking for a cheaper trip, and try out the local food. Tip number 7, and you can pay in both US dollars and pesos, the local Mexican currency in Mexico. However, for this tip, I'd advise to pay in pesos. Sometimes the US dollar exchange rates are a little bit dodgy and you'll be paying a fair bit more. From cash machines, also always get out pesos. For some reason, they inflated the price on quite a few cash machines to get dollars out. And so I just recommend you just stick to that one currency. It's a little bit different than the rest of Central America. Stick to the local currency. Tip 8. Now I referred to this earlier, but you're going to want to speak a little bit of Spanish. If you're staying on the Yucatan, it's fine, they'll mostly speak English, but if you're venturing further afield, I'd try and speak the language a little bit. So just download Duolingo. You might know a little bit of Spanish already, but it will help you get on with the locals a bit more, and they'll welcome you a lot more if you can just say a few words in Spanish, particularly in the less touristy backpacking areas. So it's just something to bear in mind so you don't go knowing nothing. Tip number 9 is the visa. Now, most nationalities don't need a visa. You get 180-day stay visa-less. However, the tip here is to make sure you keep safe the little slip they give you on arrival. You need to hand it back to them when you leave the country, and it's a very small, thin piece of paper. So I'd advise you bring like a plastic bag or something where you know you can keep it safe, keep it dry, and somewhere safe in your bag. It's so easy to lose, and you don't want any complications or stress of having to go to any embassy if you lose this piece of paper. So yeah, bring a plastic bag or something to keep that safe. Tip number 10 is not to stress about what season you're visiting Mexico. However, if you can go outside the summer months from June to September, I'd really recommend that. It's a lot quieter, cheaper prices as well, and you do get a more rich cultural experience, especially on the Yucatan, because that's when a lot of British, European or American summer holiday makers come to Mexico. So it's a very, very different vibe to if you just go a few months earlier. As well, avoid Easter if you're not into partying, particularly around the Cancun area. In fact, solely around the Cancun area, because it's the famous uni Easter break time. So that is quite a chaotic experience, I've heard. And finally, tip 11 is to avoid overnight buses in Mexico. Usually I'm an advocate for overnight buses because you save on accommodation. However, they weren't great at all. Some were okay, but you don't want to take the risk of spending such a long time on a coach. Mexico is a big country, so you might be better off flying or taking day buses. The overnight ones were not comfortable at all and pretty much ruined the next day. So those were the 11 things I wish I knew before visiting Mexico. Again, it's one of my favourite countries in the world. I didn't mention safety at all in that. That is because safety is not really a problem in Mexico. I didn't see any issues. The gang-to-gang violence was between gang to gang, and it wasn't really targeted at tourists. When I told my mates I was going to Mexico, they were like, oh, it's dangerous, watch yourself at cash machines, etc. Just take normal precautions as you would anywhere else in the world, and as long as you're not in the wrong place at the wrong time, you'll be fine. And it really is such a magnificent country, and I can't wait personally to go back and see more of the country outside the Yucatan. So I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I'll see you for another Things I Wish I Knew next week.